Welcome to Camera Confident. I'm your host, Shirlee Engel, former TV correspondent turned entrepreneur. Tune in to master what to say, how to say it, and how to create buzz for your brand. Whether you're hitting record for the first time or trying to land major media opportunities, I've got you covered. Get ready to crush it on video or stage, attract more clients, and bring in more money so you can run your business and live your life your way. I'm so excited to welcome my guest today, Simon Ostler. Simon and I actually worked together back in our days in journalism. And Simon, why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks so much for having me on, Shirley. Most recently, I was the executive producer at Global News in Toronto. Prior to that, for about the last decade, I was the managing editor of the newsroom. Managing editor is in charge of the daily story pitches and working with the reporters and executing the vision, whereas the executive producer is very much looking at the show.
Okay, so the first thing I'm sure people are wondering is, I run a business. That's a news organization. Why would I pitch a news outlet? What do I get out of it as a business owner?
First of all, you get a large audience that is engaged in the content. The audience then trusts the news organization. So you're automatically inserting yourself into that conversation where you are building trust within your community, within a large segment of the population that ideally where your business is located. If it's a national publication, you are getting that national news recognition that will really help elevate your brand to reach new people that otherwise you wouldn't know about you.
Exactly. I like to call it a borrowed audience, right? Because you can build your own audience on social media, and those are very engaged followers. But this really allows you to amplify your message way beyond what you could reasonably do yourself. You're basically borrowing a giant audience. That said, those audiences are very diverse. So what kind of guidance do you have for business owners who are wondering, like, what kinds of media outlets should they be pitching? And what are some considerations they should have when they're planning who they should pitch to?
If you are a local business and really at the grassroots level in your community, making sure that you target publications that will give you the time to tell your story and talk about the cross streets of where your business is located, and the types of people who are watching that broadcast or consuming that content are those who are craving that local content. So if you go on a national broadcast and you really want to talk about a very specific business, you might get a location of your city at most, but getting those fine details, including a look at the website for your business, and just talking about the specific community within your city or within your town, you will get a lot more traction by speaking to local media, and a lot more, as you were talking about, the audience is borrowed, but they are a lot more engaged and are more likely to turn into a client of yours or to become more aware of your brand.
So there's this misconception, like, I just want to be on Good Morning America or the Today Show to have that, that logo that you can put on your website that you can brag about. But what you're saying is that there's almost more value, at least for businesses that are just getting into this, of starting small, of starting with those local audiences where they can really get specific about what they're offering in a way that will reach people that can actually either physically come to a location or just know about them more in the community.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is access. Trying to get on Good Morning America or a national morning show is a much greater feat, just given that there are so many more large corporations with public relations teams that are pitching their ideas to these major publications. It's a huge win if you can get your broadcast, or you can get your business rather, on one of these shows. But by focusing on local media, and also focusing on what your story is. If you have an amazing story and you can share it with local media, you can share it on your social media channels, there's a good chance that those producers from those big national outlets will find you.
That brings up a really good point of there's your business, and especially for a lot of solopreneurs listening, sometimes the lines are quite blurred between the business and the individual. But when it comes to that media visibility, it really is the individual that media outlets are seeking, right? It's your expertise, it's the value that you can offer, not so much the business and what you're selling per se, but actually what you can share with the audience that is going to bring value, that is going to make you that know, like, and trust factor that you're really looking for, right?
Very much they're them as the experts. I think you need to ask yourself a question when you're pitching to local media is how can I help the media outlet solve a problem? And the problem that they need to solve is they have likely 3.5 hours, 4 hours in some cases of showtime to fill with compelling content that their viewers will like. So when you're looking at the pitch, think about yourself as how can I be an expert? How can I solve a problem for a media outlet that is looking for an expert voice in a certain area, depending on obviously what your business is. If you pitch yourself as just, I want to promote my business and I want to come on this morning show to promote this business and just talk about how great my business is, I think you're going to have a much more difficult path than if you have an interesting story to tell, or you can sell your expertise. And then your business will become self-evident. Your confidence, your ability to get your message across, that will all become self-evident, and you can have offline discussions with the producer saying, can we make sure to get a line in at the end with messaging regarding my business, like a website or where to find us? And they're most likely going to be amenable to making those considerations. And the bigger impact that you can have in an interview, the more likely you are to be called back for a second or a third interview. And then your familiarity, your face, your recognition, the trust factor with your community and with the audience only goes up from there.
Totally. So we're talking about television here, just for everybody watching and listening. And not all television shows are created equal. So you mentioned morning shows, and I know you worked extensively on morning shows. There's also like the supper hour newscast. There's all kinds of different shows. If I'm a business owner and I want to break into TV, what would you recommend as the first place to start?
Well, I think that there's benefits and drawbacks to every show. Like if you're talking about a morning show, the most likely format would be the similar to what we're doing right now, is the question and answer interview with a guest either in studio or virtually through Zoom. But you're also going to have a live interview, so you have to make sure you stick the landing and that you get your points across. You have one opportunity to get it right. But you can also, knowing that, for example, at Global, where I worked, the kind of flagship show is the 5:30, and also where you worked, Shirley, on the national team. So the format of those, to try and get an interview, to get 5 minutes, to get 4 minutes of a Q&A, question and answer with a guest, is going to be nearly impossible.
They don't really do that, right? Like it's
No.
mostly stories that are packaged. And if you're lucky, you get 5 or 10 seconds if you even make the cut of the reporter's story, right?
And the approach with when pitching for a packaged story, you really need to make sure that you have your messaging down and that you're promoting yourself as with a very interesting, compelling story to tell. And what I also say, Shirley, is that make sure you find the character. And it's probably not going to be you. It may be you. And what I mean by the character is someone who's using your product or someone who's benefiting from your business that isn't affiliated with your business. And why I suggest that you go after and suggest to the journalists that you have someone who's available is that as a managing editor, I would always say to the reporter, well, who's the character? Who's the character in the story? Because you have a great, compelling local business story, for example, but it's not a story unless you can find someone who's been impacted by it. So if you have someone in your roster who you think would be good and speak well to your brand, there's a good chance that not just 1/3 of that story will be your brand messaging, but also the 2/3 or even more of the story will be on message, because you're providing that external voice. So it's important that you find someone who isn't, your sibling or someone who's directly connected to your business, but is actually genuinely loves what you do. But finding that person is a piece that I think a lot of public relations folks don't consider. But I think it's very important to make sure that the story that you're pitching is what we call in the business a one-stop shop, where there's a guest lined up, there's an expert voice lined up, and the reporter can just show up, record for a couple hours, and they can get back and put the story together. They love that, and your business and your the quality of the storytelling will be more in the favor of your business.
Okay, so to recap, there's really two kinds of opportunities we're talking about here. One of them is a straight up live interview. You're on camera, you're talking to a host, and you're answering questions or doing some kind of demonstration. Maybe you have props. That type of thing is more than likely a morning show or some kind of lifestyle program. And then there's the news program, which is, that supper hour newscast, or, depending on what you watch in your local region, it's a pre-packaged story. And by that, I mean, it's not just you on camera talking all the time. There's visuals of different things. There might be different people talking in the story, and it's all cut up and edited. So you're saying both are options. At the end of the day, what I'm hearing is it's not about you, right?
No.
So when you're going about doing a pitch, what are some elements, and we'll talk about who to address it to in a moment, but let's break down what are some elements of the perfect television pitch. You talked about having a character. So that implies there's a story there. You're actually telling a story. Tell me more about that.
The craft of journalism is storytelling, and finding great stories, finding compelling characters. How do you find a way to find those characters? Say someone that you run a bakery and you have someone who's worked in the bakery for a long time, or someone who has an amazing backstory. If you start asking questions about some of your employees, or you just know this from working with your teams, you will start to unearth stories that can be turned around and be pitched to the media. Also, another way to get into the news is, for example, if there's a holiday or something that you can tie your business to and find that story from within, then you're much more likely to get news pickup, because as you know, Shirley, there's always a hunger for relevant stories, and always a hunger for finding those great voices that really help amplify and tell the stories of our community. But how do you get on the radar of a big media outlet? It can be difficult. It can be challenging. There are a lot of people trying to get journalists' attention, those in management. I would say, from my time as a manager in news, I would sometimes get between 10, 20, even 30 emails a day specifically related to pitches from public relations agencies. So we have so many emails coming at us, it's very difficult to break through. So what I would suggest, particularly if you're a small business and you don't have a big budget to hire one of these big public relations firms to go and get you the results, is just start small. Like what is the outlet that you like to watch, and reach out to them through their website, find ways to communicate with their general email inbox. Call the newsroom and just ask who do I pitch to. It's going to take some time to build up that level of confidence. You're going to have to get used to being rejected a lot, and I think being an entrepreneur, being a small business owner,
how's it the territory?
and you can't give up, right? And you need to find out who the key people are. I mentioned my role as the managing editor. There would be a lot of times where I get pitches where it's like, okay, there's someone better this can go to than myself. And sometimes I would forward it on to them, but sometimes I just delete it because you're just dealing with so many emails. So it's really on you trying to pitch to the media to figure out who is the right person to message, who's the right person to connect with, and getting that first response back is crucial to landing a interview. If you can solve a problem for a news organization, they're much more likely to have you back. and be open to your pitches that are maybe a little more self-serving than the ones that first got you through the door.
hmm So one thing that you said that I really want to touch on is when you were on the receiving end of those pitches and you got a pitch from a big PR agency and a pitch from an individual, which one were you more likely to look at? And is one kind of does one stand out more than the other?
I wouldn't want to paint all public relations agencies with the same brush, but some are quite generic and they're easy to just go, okay, this is sent to every newsroom in the city, maybe every newsroom in the country. And it's promoting a large brand that probably doesn't need our help and they can buy advertisements. So those ones were quick to be deleted. What caught my attention in various management roles was ones that that didn't seem like they were from a formulaic response. If it's someone who's saying, "Hey, I have a great story for you. My name is my name is blank, and I own this business, and here's my story." Very quick elevator pitch. That would be something I would respond to. That would be something I would forward on if it caught my attention. People are spending so much time combing over how do we get our message perfect so the media will pick it up. It starts with building relationships. And how do you stand out with building relationships is be conversational, be vulnerable. This is what I'm hoping for. Is this something that you'd be interested in? And if not, what could I do to make this more interesting to you?
So you go that far as to ask the person in the first pitch, or is that more of a follow-up thing?
That would be the follow-up, right? You send your pitch, and if it's a no, ask for what you can get and what it is that would make them change their mind. You're definitely not going to get a response if you don't ask and you're not curious.
I would think getting a no response is a win. They responded.
Yes.
Oh my God, it's a door. It's, if anything, it's not a rejection. If someone takes the time to say no, to me, that's an invitation to like sweeten the deal, make it better.
If by getting a no, usually you get a signature, which includes their phone number and includes more information about who they are, and maybe you get a copy. They copy someone else from the team on the email, so you do have information that will put you one step closer ahead. And I like to say, great pitch, wrong day. When I worked on the assignment desk, which is where all the incoming calls are coming from the public, and you're dealing with all the public relations phone calls. It's changed a lot in the last 10 years, but back when I was on the assignment desk, you were the first person the public spoke to. When public relations people called to follow up about their pitch, and there was some major news happening, it was almost a little delicious to be like, do you know that there's a 3-alarm fire happening right now at City Hall? And they're like, they're like, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Sometimes you have to be more blunt. Like we're dealing with major breaking news. Call back later. And that is like an absolute relationship killer. Like you're the one who calls after 3 o'clock. You're the one who calls at the top of the hour when if you're calling a radio station, that's when they're doing their newscasts. Especially if you're in a smaller market, those people answering the phones are usually the same ones who are on the air. So just trying to think, you're not going to be perfect, but always answering, hey, is it at a good time for a quick chat? It just being not expecting that just because you're calling that you're the most important thing happening to that newsroom right now will go a long way. Just do a little bit of research to make sure that, I think I'm in the clear to call right now, because I don't think anything huge is happening.
Really the equivalent of reading the room. Like it shows that you are an engaged audience member of that outlet, because if you're just trying to get on and you've never even heard of you don't even know the name of the host. I mean, that also shows that you're just trying to get on and get something from them rather than coming on and actually offering some value, right?
You're showing that you're an engaged viewer. You're not just reaching out for your own purposes, but doing that little bit of research. And that's why I say it's better to start small and do a little research on a news organization instead of just blanket sending emails to everyone and hoping that somebody spray and pray, right? Is that approach? And I think
Pray
that
and pray.
you need to really focus on finding that one win, and there's a strong chance that that could snowball into other opportunities because media monitors other media too, right? So
Get in the door. Yeah. Oh, I saw this great person on this network. We should interview them about this.
if you get on one outlet and then you pitch to another, they will look up your interview to see how well you did. So that having that proof of concept is going to benefit you when you go and pitch another outlet.
Absolutely. The other thing I like to tell people is your social media accounts are basically your video resume. So when you pitch someone, the first thing they're going to do is go check out your socials. So if you also use your social media account to make political statements, or you comment on, news, or you're doing anything on your social media that either shows you don't know what you're talking about or shows you might have said something in the past that could discredit you in some kind of way, because I've seen this too. That's another thing to be mindful of, that your social media really is a public forum, and media, they do go look you up, right? Like you get a pitch from someone. What's the first thing you do? Do you Google them?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. A thorough background check to see what they've said publicly. Social media is such a double-edged sword. You have the opportunity to really showcase your own brand and showcase how strong you are from a positive of social media. I don't know how many new expert voices in the last year at Global. We found a real estate expert who was doing amazing work on TikTok. And we're finding all of these new experts that are resonating with some of our younger staff because they follow them on TikTok, and they're coming on to do conventional television as well. So you can use social media, or social media can use you. So you want to always be in the former category than the latter. So it's important that you are mindful of, even on your own personal accounts, that may not be directly associated with your business. If you are the brand representation of your business, it's important that you keep those on brand and on message in order to not, because that may be the reason you're not getting the call back. You
It's
might
all
not be
fair
told
game.
that. You might not be told that. They just say, "Oh, sorry, we're not interested," but you can't figure out why you can't get through to them. Maybe it is a problematic social media past, but with the access that we have now, you can be discovered and you can use that to your advantage.
One thing that I think is really worth driving home, and that is having a hook, right? Like we all on social media know, okay, you want to put up a post, you need your hook, you need your call to action, and all those elements. It really is the same thing when you're talking about a media pitch, and you talked about being sensitive to what's happening. There's a lot of things that you can hitch your wagon to when it comes to finding a hook that's going to entice the media. So we talked about holidays. Here in Canada at a federal level, there's the federal budget that always is a huge media day. What are some other types of hooks that you saw in your time in journalism that you thought were really clever ways of people getting themselves on the news for one reason or another?
Well, I mean, there's certain topics that are always going to be in the media. Real estate is a huge topic here in Canada. There are, a lot of real estate agents that are posting content. But in terms of finding a hook or getting media's attention, really, it is important to follow the news cycle. And as I said earlier, be the solution to the problem that journalists have that day. So even watching the news, knowing that, we could talk about X, we could talk about this, what's happening today in our business has experts in this category, and pitching yourself. There's a university in Toronto that used to put out a daily expert list. But that was very effective. A lot of media would call and say, "Can I speak to this professor?" What they did wrong is oftentimes those professors didn't know that they were on said list, and they weren't available and weren't prepared to do the interviews. So it's important, if you're looking to whether you call it newsjacking or finding ways to get your brand in the news of the day, is to make sure that you are prepared to speak on that topic, and it's going to be a net positive for your business. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you are willing to be an expert on something that you're not actually an expert on, and it starts to backfire.
There's no such thing as bad publicity. What you're saying is actually there is.
Absolutely, because you have the one opportunity, particularly if you're coming on and you don't stick the landing, and you don't, it makes you look foolish. That is a tricky needle to thread. How to get the media coverage on an emerging story, and that's where I come back to relationship building. If you can trust the news anchor that's speaking to you, you can trust the producer that they're bringing you in on a story that you are indeed an expert voice on. You can talk to them about what you are and aren't comfortable with speaking about. It really does come down to trust.
One thing that I know a lot of people pitching media wonder about is following up. Can you walk us through? Okay, you send out your pitch, you don't hear back. What do you do? How long do you wait? What do you say? What are some best practices?
This isn't always doable in every case, just because of the type of pitch that you may be putting out. But one strategy that I would suggest is, and you have to be genuine about this, because if the media find out that you're not doing this, they will be quite offended. But the idea of saying, like, I'd like to give you first dibs on a story. Here's a story that we think would be great, and we'd like to give X media outlet an opportunity to tell it first. And that is a natural follow-up, because you are extending not only a story idea, but you're saying, I'm telling you because I want you guys to have it first.
So
So
it's
then,
like dating. You don't ask a bunch of people out on the same
no,
night, right? Like you send one pitch to one outlet, wait to hear back, and if you don't, give them a deadline and say, "Hey, I'm going to move on," type thing.
maybe one outlet per medium, right? You have a television station, you have a newspaper, and then you have a radio station. You can do kind of those three, but pitching to multiple television stations and saying, I want to give you first dibs, and you're giving more than one first dibs, it doesn't work that way. But it provides that natural ability to follow up in, 3 to 5 days, saying, just following up on this. If there's no interest, I'm okay with that. Just want to know so I can move on. I think that's an effective strategy. It puts some pressure on the news organization to make a decision and tell you whether or not they're interested in it. Because if they're not, them saying, sorry, we're going to pass this time, is at least they know they're not going to continue to get pestered by you. And then you can move on to the next news outlet and ask them if they would be interested in this opportunity. Be patient. Responding back multiple times in a day or multiple times in a week, it can get you very quickly. They start to see, oh, this is this person calling into the newsroom. Everyone has call display. Everyone sees
Oh, it's
that
her
name.
again.
Yeah, it's her again. And I hear that from the assignment desk. You walk by and it's like, don't answer that. That's this PR person calling back
Oh,
again.
wow.
So it's like
Yeah.
that being relentless will get you kind of blacklisted from even getting your phone calls answered or your emails answered. So it is that fine line. But I like the approach of just saying and being genuine about it, that you want to provide the first dibs to this news organization. And that way
Mhm.
they are likely to respond. And also newsrooms like that. Newsrooms like getting things that others don't get.
You've mentioned calls a few times, and I know there's probably people watching and listening being like, do people use phones anymore? Especially a certain generation, like maybe you'll text, but picking up a phone, that seems outrageous. Do newsrooms actually answer the phone? Because I can tell you something, when I was a journalist, I never answered the phone, ever. I had call display, and if it was someone I was waiting to hear from or someone internally, a colleague, I would answer. But otherwise, it just went to voicemail.
I think a phone call, if it works, is a very effective way of getting someone to give you an answer. Also, if you get someone on the phone, you can start to ask questions like, is this the best person to speak to regarding a morning show interview, or who would you suggest I talk to? So you can use that for information gathering. But if you don't, so I think there's value in still in trying to call and just seeing if you can get someone on the phone. Increasingly, that's going to be difficult. So the finding the right people to speak to is key. But just starting out with a general email inbox, you're very much likely not going to get any sort of response. You're never even going to know if the message was received. And that's the nature of the business. And then that's where your entrepreneurial spirit needs to come into play. And how can I get through? Who else? What other method can I try? Can I try emailing the news anchor and say like, hey, I have a pitch for you. I've reached out to news anchors saying, hey, I wanted to pitch. I have a couple pitches coming up. Who would be the best person to reach out to? And they said, oh, just let me know. Because they know ultimately they have pull within the organization, and they might even bring that up in the next story meeting. Hey, I had this person reach out to me. One example I was just thinking of, we were trying to get an anchor from CNN on our local show in Toronto because he was coming to town, Jake Tapper, and our news director emailed him, just figuring out his email address, just based on the formula. He wrote back, well, while he was on the air, saying, "Sure, I'll do that." So you just never know. But if you never try, you'll never get any results. But taking those calculated risks and reaching out to people who are that you want to be involved with, it can never hurt. You might get they might forward it on to the people who can respond, or in that case, they'll respond directly from their email address.
Yeah, actually, this is probably dating me, but way, way back in 2001, I wanted to be an intern in New York City at CBS News. So I just emailed a general email address for 48 hours. It was like info at or something like that. And I ended up getting an internship at CBS News that summer. I mean, you just never know. Someone actually looked at that at that email and said, well, we're not the right people, but forwarded it to someone else. And it led to an internship in New York. You do just never know. And what a lot of people listening probably don't realize is this is the exact method journalists and producers and assignment editors use to find people themselves, right?
Yeah, there's a little bit of respect there. I would say quite a bit of respect if you can figure out who to reach out to. When I was on the assignment desk, we would be trying to reach out to people all the time who are making the news and their family members, and figuring out how do you get in touch with people, how do you figure out who they are. So it's worth time in a calculated way, because you don't want to spend your whole day reaching out to all the different media outlets, and it just starts to become, you don't even remember who you've reached out to by the end of the day. So being calculated and being strategic, I would say, is always better than spraying and praying.
And they call it earned media for a reason, right? Like you earn the right to be on that program. And one thing that I hope people take away from this is that, sure, you can hire a PR firm, but you can also be your own PR person. And it doesn't take as much as you think. Really, they have these massive Rolodexes, but that can also cut both ways, right? Like if they're constantly sending pitches on different things, that may not get as much attention as maybe a very well thought out and crafted pitch sent from an individual who genuinely took the time to research the right person, pitch something with a hook that's actually newsworthy or timely or of interest to an audience, just really handing it over on a silver platter in a way that leads to a yes. And that includes not just the subject matter, but as you mentioned earlier, hey, I have video of this thing I'm talking about, or I've lined up Sally, who's actually tried this and was able to, have this transformation by following this system or using this product or, going through this program or something like that. So really just packaging it up with a bow is the sweet spot. I mean, that's really ideally doing the job for them. They're very busy people. And especially on a morning show, I know, and I'm sure you can attest, Simon, that the more you can just hand it on a silver platter, here's everything involved, the easier it is to get to a yes, particularly if you've got the presence to back it up. Wow, so much information there, Simon. We have so much more to talk about. You're going to join us for another episode where we're going to talk about, once you land the gig, what do you actually do for TV? Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Camera Confident. Help us grow by subscribing, liking, and sharing this podcast. And be sure to follow me on LinkedIn at Shirley Engel and on Instagram at b.camera.confident. See you next time.